Welcome back. President Obama has released his proposed budget, but is it the basis for a bipartisan agreement? Joining us now, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who's a member of the Senate Budget Committee. Right at the top of the show, Senator, and it's good to see you. I held up two different papers. One, the Wall Street Journal talking about the deal, how it's dead on arrival with Republicans, and I held up the New York Times, which is, talk about their panties are all in a bunch about this. The pillars of the Democratic Party are crumbling given his offer on this minor thing with entitlements that we're seeing. That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's maybe a little overstatement by the New York Times. Unfortunately,
but not the Journal. Okay.
No, the Journal's about accurate.
Yeah, right.
Listen, this budget is 2 months late. We've already passed a budget out of the Senate, which actually spends less than the president's budget and actually reduces the deficit by a little bit more. So, I just don't know why the president almost even bothered to do this thing. Listen, it's probably a good thing that he included chain CPI adjustment in here, but you got to look at the numbers on that. That's about $130 billion over 10 years in reduced spending, but he's increasing taxes by over $1 trillion. By the way, the deficit in Social Security over the next 10 years will be about $1.3 trillion. So the chain CPI would take care of about 10% of that. I think that's my main point. You can take a look at these 10-year numbers, but you really have to take a look at what does his budget propose in the first year. He increases spending by about $160 billion. His deficit is $128 billion more than CBO. Where do you go with that? Even the Senate budget, which is not adequate, never balances. His never balances. That's actually lower spending than the president's. So I guess I have to agree with the Wall Street Journal. I don't see his budget going anywhere.
He is getting a lot of flack from his base on this. Do you think that it was a true olive branch? It did take something for him to do this, didn't it? With the chain CPI, the more moderate people in your party are saying, well, maybe this does give us something to actually talk about.
Yeah, but Joe, again, put it all into perspective. $130 billion when Social Security will run a $1.3 trillion deficit over the next 10 years, $5 trillion deficit over the next 20 years. And by the way, that trust fund has no value to the federal government. I made that point in our committee hearing yesterday, confirming, this confirmation hearing on the next OMB director, Burwell. The Social Security Trust Fund has no value. So we have to really take a look at the depth of the problem, and that's really where we need to start. Rather than throwing out these solutions, we have to first agree on the depth of the problem.
Yeah.
You first of all have to admit you have a problem, and that's the problem on the left. They're not even admitting they have a problem. They're saying Social Security is solvent to the year 2035. It is not. It's going to run huge deficits. So you have to first admit you have a problem, then define it, and we're not even at that stage yet.
Senator, the other thing, I don't know. I don't know whether the GOP has hired a PR firm yet, but there's just one thing I might bring up is that you talk about the sequester, and now that it's on everyone's lips as the cause for the weak economy and the bad jobs number. Show people what that spending cuts, and what is it, $80 billion a year or something? That doesn't come. Okay, but what about another $1 trillion in taxes? Can't you explain that taking in 10 years, taking $100 billion out of the private sector every year is the same? It's even worse than the sequester. But he throws on $1 trillion in new taxes like it's balanced and like it's what we're supposed to do. That would hurt the economy and hurt jobs, wouldn't it? Look at what the last one did, the payroll tax cut.
Joe, you don't have to convince me that.
Well, you got to hire a PR firm. You want me to start one or something?
Well, please, help us out here. No doubt about it. Economic growth is far more effective. I've quoted these figures before. Even with the meager economic growth we've had from 2009 to 2012, revenues increased $344 billion per year. You just return to a normal economy, that's another $400 billion per year of revenue through economic growth. But let's face it, the New York Times, the left has done a pretty good job of addicting Americans to government. Everybody's looking to the federal government to solve their problems. The problem is the federal government. All the rules, all the regulations. Joe, I was in Wisconsin last week. There was a business that did an engineering study on Boiler Mac. It will cost them $5 million to try and comply. It'll reduce dust, non-toxic particulate matter by 2 dump truck loads per year. That's it.
Yep.
That's the problem. This federal government is forcing businesses to comply with these regulations that have very little effect. It's crushing job creation.
Real quickly, we had David Walker on earlier this week. He said he thought that the president's budget was going to be a step in the right direction because it was going to take off everybody on the far left and on the far right. I take it you disagree with that statement.
Well, again, the minor tweak in terms of trying to figure out what the true inflation rate is $130 billion over 10 years. So that's $13 billion per year in a $3,800 billion year budget is what President Obama is proposing. It's nothing. But it's a step in the right direction. At least it's some nodding to reality. But again, the real reality of the situation is Social Security is going bankrupt, Medicare is going bankrupt, and unless we actually start looking at structural reforms to make these things solvent for the next 75 years, which, by the way, I put that amendment in during the budget process, only one Democrat voted to make these programs solvent for the next 75 years. That kind of shows you their level of seriousness.
All right, Senator, why anyone thought you should be spread so thin, trying to turn around J.C. Penney and serve as a senator would be on me.
I tried real hard, but I'm ousted.
You got rid of the job. This is a more important job, I would say.
Yeah,
Thank you
I'll concentrate on this one.
Thanks for focusing on the Senate, Ron Johnson. Thank you.